another reality, where moments twisted just slightly, where the current of fate gently tugged in a different direction, the story of Sasuke Uchiha did not end with resistance. He did not sever his ties with Orochimaru. He did not strike back, outwit, or overpower. Instead, under the heavy veil of obsession and revenge, he surrendered. Not knowingly, not as a final act of defeat, but as someone who believed, however briefly, that power was worth the price. And in that moment of clouded judgment, Orochimaru found what he had waited years for: a perfect vessel, a body strong enough to withstand the crushing weight of his ambition. The boy who was meant to revive the Uchiha name became the shell that held the mind of a serpent. It began not with a roar, but with silence. Orochimaru's lair, nestled deep beneath the earth, hidden by winding tunnels and damp stone corridors, was where the transition took place. Sasuke, bruised and exhausted from countless missions and relentless training, sat before his master, unaware that his next breath would be one of his last as himself. Orochimaru had waited. He had endured the years, the betrayal of Konoha, the dissolution of the Akatsuki, all for this singular goal: to live forever, to learn every jutsu, to transcend mortality itself. And Sasuke was his doorway. The ritual was smooth, too smooth. Unlike his previous attempts with other bodies, Sasuke's strength made the process fluid. There was no struggle, no last-minute resistance. Orochimaru, for the first time, felt truly unstoppable. He blinked open his new eyes, Sharingan, bright and spinning, laced with possibilities, and flexed new fingers, slender yet lethal. He had done it. He had become more than a Sannin. He had become a vessel of infinite potential. But the world did not pause to acknowledge this shift. It continued forward, unaware that its balance had been quietly shattered. Orochimaru, now within Sasuke's body, began his subtle return, not through force or declaration, but with calculated, silent steps. He dissolved the last traces of his previous self, burning the laboratory, scattering his former test subjects, and erasing the research trails that had once led others to him. Kabuto, once his loyal apprentice, was discarded like a tool grown obsolete. The snake had no need for assistance now. He had become the thing he had always envied, a genius with unmatched power, a prodigy with a bloodline legacy. And he wore it like a second skin. Konoha, meanwhile, still believed in the mission. Naruto, Sakura, Kakashi. They all continued the chase, convinced that Sasuke could be brought back, that redemption was still within reach. But each time they heard rumors of Sasuke appearing near an old battleground, or being seen training in remote mountain ranges, it wasn't Sasuke they were tracking. It was Orochimaru. And though they didn't know it yet, they were no longer chasing a lost friend. They were following a ghost wearing his face. Orochimaru wasted no time in unlocking the secrets of the Sharingan. With his immense knowledge and Sasuke's gifted lineage, he found himself navigating the depths of the Uchiha's Kekkei Genkai with frightening ease. Genjutsu, once a tool he respected from afar, now bent effortlessly to his will. The Mangekyo Sharingan awakened soon after, not through grief, but through twisted imitation. Orochimaru simulated the necessary loss, crafted artificial memories, and forced the evolution. The eye responded. Power had never come easier. He knew better than to charge into conflict. The 5 great nations were still recovering from war. They were cautious, vigilant, but tired. Orochimaru used this. He cloaked himself in diplomacy, appeared in the land of iron under a false name, introduced himself as a rogue Uchiha, seeking a place to use his abilities for the good of all. And with Sasuke's face, his Sharingan, and his poise, few questioned it. The land of iron, desperate for strength after years of neutrality, granted him safe passage. From there, he built influence, gathering those disillusioned by the old shinobi ways. And in the quiet, something more profound began to take shape. Orochimaru, now in Sasuke's body, began to feel things he hadn't expected. Memories, whispers of a brother once loved and hated, fragments of Team 7's laughter, visions of a childhood stolen. Sasuke had not entirely vanished. Like a ghost clinging to its home, his essence remained. Orochimaru was powerful, but not invulnerable. The soul of his vessel pulsed faintly beneath the surface, and in moments of weakness, it spoke. A gentle defiance, a reminder that no power could erase a person completely. This revelation disturbed him. For all his planning, Orochimaru had never accounted for the idea that a body might resist not just physically, but spiritually. He began to dream. Visions of Itachi's sorrowful gaze, of Naruto's relentless optimism, of Sakura's tears. At first, he dismissed them as echoes, but they grew louder, stronger. The more he tapped into Sasuke's chakra, the more the memories surged. He was no longer alone in his mind. Still, he pushed forward. The world had to change, and he was the only one with the vision and power to reshape it. The old system of Kaj and hidden villages, of bloodlines hoarded and jutsu restricted, had to fall. He began by dismantling small villages, subtly, strategically. He would offer them peace and technology, education and medicine, only to integrate their shinobi into his own growing network. No more wars for land or pride, only evolution. But his plans would not go unnoticed for long. Kakashi, now Hokage, sensed something off. The reports of Sasuke's kindness felt wrong. The timelines didn't add up. His appearance, demeanor, even speech patterns were subtly different. Naruto refused to believe it at first. His bond with Sasuke had been unshakable, but even he couldn't ignore the chill that ran through him when they finally met again. Orochimaru, in Sasuke's skin, smiling with eyes that didn't recognize him. Their reunion would be quiet at first. A field of tall grass swaying under an orange sky. No army, no witnesses. Just two souls standing across from one another. And as the wind carried the scent of the past, of broken bonds and battles lost, Orochimaru spoke not with hatred, but with a kind of calm that unnerved Naruto. "Sasuke is gone," he said. "But in his place, something greater has been born." Naruto clenched his fists. He didn't understand everything, but he knew one thing. Sasuke had to be brought back. Somehow, some way. Even if his soul was buried under layers of a serpent's ambition. But Orochimaru, in that moment, did not attack. He simply turned and walked away, confident in his control. But the voice of Sasuke, faint and echoing, whispered just one word inside: Naruto. And so, a new path unfolded. The wind outside the Hidden Leaf Village was silent the day Sasuke's body truly became Orochimaru's vessel. No grand battle followed. No witness stood to see it happen. Just one boy, one snake, and one ambition sealed in a cursed embrace. The moment was quiet, almost serene. Orochimaru had done it. He had taken the body of Uchiha Sasuke, the last vessel he would ever need. And with it, he had inherited everything he craved. Power. Potential. The Sharingan. The dream of immortality was no longer a dream. It was unfolding, breath by breath, under his cold new skin. Sasuke's mind, his soul, screamed from the depths, imprisoned within a spiritual tomb Orochimaru had perfected through years of forbidden research. The inner world of consciousness, where battles of will had once been fought. This time, there was no fight. Orochimaru had prepared too well, his jutsu too complete. Sasuke's resistance had been anticipated and dissolved. Slowly, Sasuke faded, his thoughts drifting like mist in a void. A whisper at best. Orochimaru had won. With Sasuke's body now fully integrated, Orochimaru began experimenting, not just with techniques, but with limits, his own, and those of the Sharingan. Unlike past vessels, Sasuke's body held no weak tissue, no instability. It was agile, trained, precise, and far more adaptable than even Orochimaru had imagined. For the first time in decades, he felt invincible. His chakra control had sharpened, no longer muddied by decay or resistance. He was stronger, faster, hungrier. It didn't take long for word to spread. Sasuke Uchiha had disappeared. And Orochimaru, the serpent who had long haunted the Leaf's history books, had resurfaced. But this time, different, changed. He moved more fluidly, his power more refined. Old acquaintances from the shinobi world began to take notice. Kabuto, ever loyal and always watching, became both servant and scientist, keeping careful documentation of Orochimaru's progress. Even he couldn't help but admire the elegance of this union. Orochimaru, had never looked more alive. Konoha responded immediately. The fifth Hokage, Tsunade, knew what this meant. If Orochimaru truly possessed Sasuke's body, the consequences were dire. The Sharingan in the hands of the most notorious defector of the village's history. It was a nightmare come alive. Meetings were held in the Hokage Tower. Jiraiya returned from his travels early. Kakashi volunteered for the front lines, the memory of his fallen comrade and his student colliding in his chest like jagged glass. Naruto was devastated, but also focused. He swore, in that moment, that if Orochimaru still wore Sasuke's face, then he would bring him back, or put him to rest himself. But Orochimaru wasn't waiting. He was already on the move. With Sasuke's knowledge of the Uchiha clan, and the full capabilities of the Sharingan now at his disposal, he began targeting ancient relics and scrolls sealed in remote villages, places even the Akatsuki had forgotten. He wanted to understand the evolution of the Uchiha, to refine Sasuke's potential and see if it could be pushed further. Mangekyo, eternal Mangekyo. Rinnegan. These weren't dreams. They were steps on a staircase Orochimaru fully intended to climb. His first stop was a small ruin near the Land of Lightning, a hidden temple thought to be linked to an Uchiha exile who once attempted to combine the Sharingan and Senju DNA. There, Orochimaru fought a small faction of rogue ninja who had been guarding the place for decades. The battle was swift. Using Chidori laced with serpent chakra, he tore through them with precision. They barely had time to understand what they were facing. One of the ninja, an elderly woman with deep roots in Kumo's history, recognized Sasuke's face before her final breath. "You were once the child of Konoha," she whispered, the light leaving her eyes, and Orochimaru just smiled. The dreams of the Uchiha were now fused with his own. He saw the flaw in their tragic path, revenge, hatred, blood feuds, and decided to redirect it. Not to peace, but to legacy. Power that was preserved through intellect and evolution. Not love, not war, but transformation. He believed the Uchiha had stagnated, their pain cycling endlessly like a broken wheel. Hima, the snake, would slither across that wheel and redirect its spin. This time, not through rebirth, but through ascension. Meanwhile, deep within Orochimaru's mindscape, Sasuke stirred. His presence wasn't fully gone, just buried. Orochimaru had underestimated one thing: the tenacity of the Uchiha will. Even sealed away, Sasuke began to adapt. His chakra leaked into Orochimaru's, corrupting it subtly. The integration, once flawless, began to ripple with conflict. Orochimaru started experiencing visions, memories not his own. Moments with Naruto, with Kakashi, with Itachi. Feelings of doubt, of sorrow. Emotions that were foreign to him. But Orochimaru mistook it for spiritual side effects. He thought it was simply residue from the transfer. After all, he was in control, wasn't he? As weeks turned into months, Orochimaru's power soared. His experimentation continued, and so it was that the body of Sasuke Uchiha, once a vessel of vengeance and pride, became the perfect shell for the ancient ambition of Orochimaru. Slipping fully into the vessel, Orochimaru felt youth course through his veins again. But this time, it wasn't temporary, imperfect, or unstable. With the blood of the Uchiha, the mind of a prodigy, and the body of a warrior trained under both Kakashi and Orochimaru himself, he had crafted a vessel unlike any before. The Sharingan opened, glowing red with 3 tomoe, and slowly he smiled, admiring his reflection. For the first time in decades, he saw not decay or desperation, but a future he could mold with his own hands. The first weeks were filled with quiet experimentation. Orochimaru had always been a scientist of forbidden things, and now he had a perfect subject, himself. Testing the limits of the Uchiha body, he trained relentlessly in the hidden chambers of his new underground lair, which bore marks of both the Uchiha clan's austere legacy and his own serpentine aesthetic. He pushed the body harder than Sasuke ever dared, awakening muscle memory and technique locked away by trauma or hesitation. The Chidori screamed with more precision. The fireball jutsu burned with deeper rage. And the snake techniques he merged with Sharingan genjutsu created illusions so seamless they blurred reality. Yet Orochimaru was never one to settle. The Mangekyu Sharingan was a power he could now strive for legitimately. He studied Sasuke's memories. Yes, he could access fragments of them, though blurred and colored by emotion. He saw the death of Itachi, the whispers of truth behind the massacre, the agony of loss and betrayal. Orochimaru, now wearing Sasuke's past as part of his identity, realized something deeper. Emotions were the true fuel of the Uchiha. To unlock the Mangekyu, he needed grief. He needed sacrifice. It was then that he remembered Karin, Suigetsu, and Jugo, the old comrades Sasuke had once traveled with. They were expendable in his view, but Orochimaru saw potential in their utility. He returned to them, not with threats, but with calm persuasion, playing the part of Sasuke. His mimicry was flawless. The tone, the distance, the quiet intensity. They believed their leader had returned to finish the mission. Karin, still hopelessly loyal, fell into his plans easily. Jugo, as unstable as ever, required little convincing. Suigetsu remained skeptical, but his interest in power kept him close. Under Orochimaru's guidance, the 4 of them began a dark campaign. Konoha had grown arrogant, fat with peace in the years following Pain's invasion and the 4th Great War's resolution. The villages cooperated in public, but old rivalries lingered in shadows. Orochimaru, ever the master of exploiting cracks, began stirring those tensions again. He approached hidden factions, former root operatives, remnants of the Sound Four's ideology, even some disillusioned leaf shinobi. Those who felt their sacrifices had been forgotten. To them, he offered a new vision, a world not led by tradition or weak Hokage, but by evolution, by adaptation, by strength of will and body. But even as his network expanded, Orochimaru sought more. The Mangekyou remained elusive. The necessary death, one that could truly stir Sasuke's heart, still evaded him. It was then he devised a cruel experiment. Karen, ever faithful, was brought to a secluded shrine, and in a chilling ceremony, masked as a test of loyalty, Orochimaru, using Sasuke's own hands, struck her down. Her eyes widened not in fear, but in confused betrayal. In her last breath, she reached out, not to attack, but to understand. The echo of that moment burned into his soul. And when the flames of her death faded, the Mangekyou awakened. The power surged like wildfire. Orochimaru staggered, clutching his face as the eyes morphed, the tomoe spinning into a more sinister pattern. He saw the world differently now, not just in color or movement, but in intention, in fragility. The Mangekyou granted him techniques Sasuke had never accessed, enhanced genjutsu that wove memories with lies, Amaterasu black flames that obeyed new logic, and a heightened version of Kamui that let him phase between dimensions for brief moments. But it wasn't without cost. Even Orochimaru, master of body manipulation, felt the strain. The eye bled with overuse, and the headaches were beyond what he anticipated. He needed the eternal Mangekyou. And for that, he would need Itachi's eyes. Of course, Itachi was already gone. But Orochimaru knew of Kabuto's preservation techniques. He had learned them in fragments. It was possible, just possible, that the eyes were retrievable. Even more, the legacy of the Uchiha was not completely dead. Somewhere, perhaps in the ruins of old Akatsuki labs or hidden leaf archives, were samples, scrolls, or preserved tissue that could allow him to clone or regenerate the necessary material. In the meantime, Orochimaru used his newfound power to advance his political game. Infiltrating meetings, impersonating messengers, and manipulating correspondence, he began to isolate the Hokage. Naruto. He painted him as weak, overly compassionate, out of touch with shinobi reality. Even among his allies, the seeds of doubt were growing. Orochimaru had no intention of fighting Konoha directly, not yet. Instead, he wanted it to collapse from within, to rot slowly, while its savior tried to hold it all together. Yet, amidst this cold manipulation, a strange thing began to happen. Orochimaru, for all his detachment, began to feel echoes of Sasuke's memories, not as tools, but as flickers of emotion. A child reaching for his brother's hand, the fear of abandonment, the quiet peace of walking under falling leaves in autumn. Orochimaru dismissed them at first as side effects, but the more they came, the harder they were to ignore. Perhaps Sasuke's soul had not been fully devoured. Perhaps some fragment, some moral compass, or phantom echo remained buried deep within the vessel. But Orochimaru was not one to fear ghosts. He embraced them, studied them, mastered them. If there was still a voice in the darkness, he would either silence it or use it. After all, he now had the time. With Sasuke's body, Mangekyou eyes, and a world slipping ever closer to chaos, Orochimaru had never felt more alive. And deep beneath the earth, in a chamber hidden from all sight, the snake shed its final skin, gazing upward toward the surface, not with hunger, but with patience. Because for Orochimaru, victory was never about rushing in. It was about the long game. And the game had only just begun. And so, Orochimaru, reborn in Sasuke's body, had finally obtained what he believed was the vessel perfect enough to carry his legacy into eternity. With this new form came unimaginable power. Eyes that could see the flow of chakra with terrifying clarity. Reflexes honed by years of battle within Sasuke's body, and chakra reserves that pulsed with the violent will of the Uchiha bloodline. Orochimaru felt alive in a way he hadn't for decades. And yet, as he wandered through the ruined corridors of his old hideouts, deep in reflection, something stirred within him. The boy's mind had not been completely erased. Sasuke's presence was still there, quiet, buried, but lingering, like a whisper in the dark. Orochimaru dismissed it at first. He believed he could contain it, suppress it as he had countless others he'd experimented on or overtaken. But Sasuke's hatred, his resolve, was unlike anything Orochimaru had encountered before. It wasn't loud or panicked. It was calm, cold, and persistent. A steady heartbeat in the back of Orochimaru's mind. This wasn't a soul that would fade easily. Still, Orochimaru continued his work. He returned to his laboratory with renewed obsession, creating new iterations of jutsu that took full advantage of the Sharingan and the cursed knowledge he had gathered from forbidden scrolls. He was no longer just a serpent hiding in the shadows. With Sasuke's body and his own mind, he was now a force that stood at the very edge of godhood. The Akatsuki, who once viewed Orochimaru as a discarded member and a nuisance, began to feel the change. One by one, their scouts disappeared, never to return. It wasn't long before Orochimaru, now more Sasuke than the man he once was, stood before them uninvited. He tore through their forces with elegance and horror alike. Deidara's explosives lit the sky, only to be redirected by Sharingan-controlled genjutsu. Kisame's chakra was drained and redistributed in a brutal mimicry of the 8 gates. Even Itachi, who once looked down on Orochimaru, found himself staring into a mirror of the brother he had tried to protect. But this version of Sasuke was colder, crueler, with Orochimaru's hunger mixed with the precision of an Uchiha avenger. They clashed under a storm-filled sky, Mangekyo against Mangekyo, two broken souls tied by fate. Itachi could see it clearly now. This was no longer just Orochimaru's victory. This was Sasuke's vengeance too. Somewhere deep within, Sasuke's pain was leaking into Orochimaru's thoughts, guiding his decisions, whispering the names of those who had wronged him. Danzo, the elders, Konoha. It wasn't just about immortality anymore. It was about reckoning. And that frightened even Orochimaru. As their battle ended with both shinobi collapsing in exhaustion, Itachi saw his brother's eyes for what they were. Corrupted, but awake. Orochimaru had taken the body, but Sasuke was still fighting from within. Orochimaru staggered away, victorious, but troubled. He had underestimated the strength of the boy's hatred, not as a weakness, but as a presence too immense to erase. Over time, this internal war began to manifest in Orochimaru's movements. His speech grew more fragmented, his goals more chaotic. He would one day build and the next destroy, seemingly unable to decide what future he wanted. Eventually, Orochimaru, no longer able to ignore the interference, sought a solution. He turned to ancient relics hidden in the Valley of the End, the very place where Hashirama and Madara once battled for the soul of the shinobi world. There, he hoped to sever Sasuke's will entirely, using forbidden techniques born in the Warring States era. But fate is never so easily tamed. As the ritual began, something within him rebelled. Sasuke surged forward, not physically, but spiritually, his memories rushing through Orochimaru's mind like a tide. The Uchiha clan massacre, his brother's betrayal, Naruto's hand reaching out to save him, Sakura's tears, Kakashi's burden, all of it flooding the vessel that had once belonged to him. Orochimaru cried out, gripping his head, the pain unbearable. He had never experienced emotions like these, not truly. In all his decades of pursuit, he had studied pain, but never lived it. He had manipulated loyalty, but never felt it. And now, Sasuke's soul was forcing him to endure the memories he had tried to bury. Not just images, but sensations. The sting of loss, the warmth of brotherhood, the icy grip of revenge. Orochimaru, for the first time in his long, twisted life, wept. It was then he realized something horrifying. He wasn't just using Sasuke's body anymore. He was becoming Sasuke. The more he drew upon the boy's chakra and eyes, the more their identities blurred. He looked in the mirror and saw not a serpent, but an avenger. His speech began to echo with Sasuke's tone. His thoughts drifted not toward new experiments, but toward Konoha, toward justice, toward vengeance, toward something deeply, undeniably human. The lines had been crossed too many times to be uncrossed. Orochimaru's experiment was no longer in his control. The shinobi world began to change around him. Whispers of a new threat emerged. A figure dressed in black, wearing the Uchiha crest, but acting unlike either Orochimaru or Sasuke ever had before. He moved like a shadow, took no sides, and seemed to strike only at moments that would most disrupt the balance of power. Kages vanished without trace. Clans fell silent. Rogue experiments that once served Orochimaru were now hunted down and erased. This new entity was shaping the world not as a scientist nor a shinobi, but as a force of inevitability. He was not seeking immortality anymore. He was enforcing judgment. Naruto, now grown and powerful, eventually caught word of the figure. He refused to believe Sasuke had fallen so far. And yet, even he could not ignore the chakra signature, the undeniable presence of his old friend, twisted and fused with the serpentine cunning of their most dangerous enemy. As Naruto prepared for what might be his greatest test yet, Orochimaru, if that name still meant anything, stood at the edge of a cliff, wind brushing through the black cloak he wore. The stars above shimmered like silent observers. In his hand, a piece of parchment on which he had scribbled something strange. He read it aloud, softly, in a voice that trembled with both genius and grief. To erase the past, one must first become it. And in the silence that followed, only the sound of the waves echoed back. As the days passed following Orochimaru's global reveal, the shinobi world braced for a new kind of storm. There was no more subtlety, no more lurking in the shadows. Orochimaru, wielding the body and immense potential of Sasuke Uchiha, had become the focal point of a revolution in power and ideology. Konoha had watched in horror as its former prodigy, now subsumed by the snake Sannin, walked freely among nations, offering both fear and favor. And those who listened to him soon realized that Orochimaru's vision extended beyond mere conquest. He wanted to tear down the very notion of legacy itself. Orochimaru had always despised the way power was hoarded through bloodlines, the way clans hoisted themselves above others through accident of birth. With Sasuke's Sharingan, he became the very symbol of what he sought to dismantle. In a bitter irony, he now used the ultimate bloodline as a weapon to unmake all others. And this contradiction did not go unnoticed. Some shinobi, especially those from smaller villages, or those born without powerful clans, began to view Orochimaru not just as a tyrant, but as a liberator. He traveled not just as a conqueror, but as a teacher. In the Rain Village, he unlocked hidden potential in orphaned shinobi, teaching forbidden arts that bypassed Kekkei Genkai altogether. In the stone, he experimented with chakra fusion, showing how anyone could replicate elemental combinations through technique rather than heritage. And in the mist, where bloodlines had long been persecuted and later restored, he made a provocative promise that the future would belong to those who created power, not inherited it. But behind every lesson was a shadow. Orochimaru's experiments were never free of cost. Many who trained under him grew more powerful, but they also grew more hollow. A part of themselves faded, whether it was their sense of self, their morality, or their physical humanity. For all his talk of freedom, Orochimaru had not changed. He simply learned to wear his tyranny with a velvet glove. The world was being reshaped in his image, one laboratory at a time. Back in Konoha, the debate raged. Could Orochimaru be stopped now? Or had they waited too long, underestimated him for too many years? Kakashi stood in the council chambers, his voice steady, but filled with regret. He'd once tried to guide Sasuke, tried to teach him what it meant to protect rather than destroy. But now, Sasuke's eyes stared out from behind Orochimaru's grin, and those eyes knew every weakness of Konoha's defenses, every tactic, every strength. The village wasn't just fighting a monster, it was fighting one of its own turned inside out. Naruto, too, had been silent for days after the reveal, not out of despair, but contemplation. He knew Sasuke better than anyone, knew his pain, his pride, his loneliness. And somewhere, buried deep in that merged soul, Naruto believed a flicker of the old Sasuke still remained. Maybe that was foolish. Maybe the Orochimaru inside had completely swallowed him, but Naruto had always believed in lost causes. In his heart, he clung to the possibility that if he could reach Sasuke, really reach him, he might be able to pull him back. So when the villages gathered at the Valley of the End, a place soaked in the memory of their first catastrophic battle, Naruto volunteered to go alone. The others protested. They said Orochimaru would kill him, or worse, use his body next. But Naruto only smiled. I have to try, because if I don't, then we've already lost. And so it was that Naruto stood once more on that ancient battlefield, the statues of Hashirama and Madara looming behind him like ghosts of what once was. Across from him stood Orochimaru, cloaked in black, with Sasuke's face lit by the eerie gleam of his eternal Sharingan. The wind carried silence between them, heavy and expectant. You came alone, Orochimaru said, voice as smooth as ever, but layered with something colder, deeper. Sasuke's cadence echoed through it now. I expected a war party. I suppose this is your famous recklessness. Naruto didn't flinch. You're not Sasuke, but he's in there. I can feel it. And I'm going to bring him back. Orochimaru chuckled. Ah, the enduring fantasy of friendship. You always were the sentimental one. But you've misunderstood. Sasuke didn't lose to me. He welcomed me. He saw what I offered. Freedom. Power. The chance to remake a world that betrayed him. He hated you, Naruto said, stepping forward. He used you, just like you tried to use him. But he never wanted this. Not really. For a moment, Orochimaru's eyes flickered, and for just a heartbeat, there was a twitch, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, like something deep within was straining against the surface. Sasuke, Naruto said, softer now. If you can hear me, remember what we fought for, what we promised. You said you'd kill me to sever your ties, but those ties, they saved you. They saved me. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. And then Orochimaru raised his hand. In an instant, the valley cracked with force. Jutsu erupted from beneath the earth, serpents of flame and lightning coiling upward. Naruto dodged, his sage mode flaring, eyes fierce but calm. He didn't strike back. Not yet. He needed to see, to be sure. Through the haze of battle, he noticed it again. A pause, a hesitation. Orochimaru's attacks were precise, deadly, but occasionally delayed, as if something inside him was resisting. And Naruto realized the truth. Sasuke was fighting from within. "You're still in there," he shouted, leaping toward Orochimaru. "You haven't given up yet." For the first time, Orochimaru snarled, an expression uncharacteristic of his usual composure. "Silence!" But it was too late. The chakra within him surged. A chaotic flicker of red and blue. The clash of wills had begun. The snake and the hawk coiled in an endless spiral. And Naruto knew the real battle was only just beginning, and so the shinobi world began to shift. With Sasuke's body now housing the mind of Orochimaru, and with the snake's techniques and intelligence fused with the young Uchiha's unmatched potential, the balance of power had irreversibly tilted. Konoha, despite its centuries of resilience, found itself increasingly unsure of how to respond to the new threat that loomed like a storm cloud just beyond the horizon. Whispers began to rise within its borders, not of fear alone, but of mourning. Mourning not just for the boy who had once been one of their own, but for the world that was slowly being eclipsed by a colder, more cunning future. Orochimaru, now in full possession of Sasuke's Sharingan and its evolved form, had taken refuge within the shadows of the land of sound. Otogakure had once been a twisted reflection of his ambitions, a place of experimentation and secrecy. But under his new leadership, enhanced by Sasuke's charisma and power, it began to transform into something far more organized, far more threatening. It was no longer merely a hiding place for his ambitions. It was a symbol of them, a nation not born of tradition, but of vision. And his vision was one of absolute mastery, not just of ninjutsu or bodies, but of destiny itself. He did not move recklessly. Despite the vast increase in his strength and knowledge, Orochimaru was as patient as ever, choosing to act only when the moment was perfect. Through Sasuke's appearance, he extended olive branches to rogue ninja, tempted clans on the fringe, and sowed seeds of doubt even among Konoha's allies. More than one hidden village received quiet visitors at dusk, masked and silent, offering alliances built on power rather than principle. Meanwhile, Naruto Uzumaki trained with fury and desperation. When word finally reached him, confirmation that Orochimaru had succeeded, that Sasuke was truly gone, it did not break him, but it did change him. A layer of innocence peeled away. He pushed harder, deeper into sage mode, into the nine tails chakra, even dabbling in techniques that once would have terrified him. He still hoped, yes, but it was a quieter, more haunted hope. A hope that recognized that the boy he once knew might never come back. Not truly. Kakashi, too, wore the weight of loss like a cloak. He felt, perhaps more than most, the aching failure of being unable to save either his student or his comrade. Watching Naruto grow stronger, he saw flashes of Obito, of Minato, of Rin. The cycle, it seemed, would never stop repeating itself. But instead of turning inward, he made a vow to remain, to train, to fight, even if only to slow the spiral long enough for someone else to break it. Back in the shadows, Orochimaru was not idle. He continued to delve into forbidden techniques, now with far more clarity than he had ever possessed. With Sasuke's body, he could wield the Mangekyo Sharingan without fear of rejection. Through endless experimentation, he discovered new ways to harness its power without going blind. He studied Itachi's Tsukuyomi and Amaterasu with almost religious reverence, seeking ways to replicate or distort them. And as for the Rinnegan, the whispers of its power, the tales of the Sage of Six Paths, he did not dismiss them as myth. No, Orochimaru had tasted godhood now, and he wanted more. Kabuto remained by his side, but the dynamic between them had shifted. Once the loyal apprentice, Kabuto now moved with more caution. His own ambitions kept quieter than before. He could see the transformation in his master, could sense the dangerous volatility that now lived beneath that calm exterior. Sasuke's body had given Orochimaru more than power. It had given him pride, passion, vengeance. It had made him hungry in ways that even he hadn't expected. Despite his growing might, Orochimaru had not yet declared war. He didn't need to. His influence was spreading like roots beneath the earth, unseen but unrelenting. More and more shinobi defected to Otogakure, drawn not just by power, but by vision. The promise of a world where knowledge ruled over bloodlines, where loyalty was not dictated by birthright, but by merit. One such defector was a young Hyuga from the branch house, desperate to escape the seal placed upon him since birth. Another was a disillusioned Jonin from Tsunagakure, tired of the endless desert politics and hungry for innovation. Orochimaru welcomed them all, molding them, training them, twisting their gifts into something sharp. And in doing so, he created a new generation of followers, shinobi, who owed nothing to the 5 great nations and everything to him. But not all were so easily swayed. The 5 Kaj convened in secret, their meetings shrouded in silence and suspicion. Temari, representing the new Kazekage, Gaara, warned that Orochimaru's silence was more dangerous than his chaos. Tsunade, her fists clenched and heart heavy, agreed. The time for waiting was nearing its end. they needed to act, not just to protect Konoha, but to protect the delicate balance that held the shinobi world together. And yet, how does one fight a shadow that does not strike? How do you battle a force that invades minds, whispers in the dark, and conquers without bloodshed? That was the genius of Orochimaru's plan. The snake slithered without sound, and by the time you felt his bite, the venom had already spread. Still, hope lingered. In the heart of Naruto, in the resolve of Sakura, in the quiet fury of Kakashi, and in the dreams of those who still believed that redemption was possible, even for a soul as twisted and stolen as Sasuke's. But the time for dreams was slipping away. And as Orochimaru stood atop the highest tower in Otogakure, the wind blowing through hair that was no longer his, he saw the world laid bare before him. And in his eyes, those dark, spinning eyes, was not madness. It was certainty. The snake had shed his skin. And what had emerged was something new, something the world was not ready to face. And so, in the final act of this quiet nightmare turned reality, the world began to settle beneath the weight of its new truth. Orochimaru, once laughed off as a fringe threat, mad, obsessive, crawling in the shadows of his more illustrious comrades, had succeeded. With Sasuke Uchiha's body as his new vessel, the tide of shinobi power tilted, and the ripple effect echoed far beyond the halls of Konoha or the scattered remnants of the Akatsuki. But no war drums sounded. No cataclysmic battles roared in the background. This was a quiet conquest, a subtle consumption of fate, choice by choice. From within the body of Sasuke, Orochimaru crafted a new identity. He did not immediately raise villages or declare himself a god. No, he was more cunning than that. His first moves were surgical, quiet replacements of key figures in several smaller nations, subtle manipulation of policy, the infiltration of the education systems within fringe shinobi villages. Within 5 years, the children of the Land of Sound were being taught chakra theory from scrolls penned in Orochimaru's twisted but brilliant hand. Within 10, those ideas spread to the land of rivers and the far north. He did not need armies when he could shape the minds of the next generation. But not all stood by idly. Naruto, driven by his bond to Sasuke, and by the horror of what had come to pass, remained Konoha's strongest hope. Yet even he had changed. His smile was rarer now. The boy who once shouted his dreams to the sky now walked with the weight of understanding. He had fought Orochimaru Sasuke many times over the years, each time learning more about the darkness that now animated his former best friend, and about his own limits. No jutsu could reach Sasuke anymore. No tearful plea, no shared memory of Team 7. Orochimaru had buried all that beneath a sea of serpents. And yet, Naruto did not stop. He formed a new alliance, one not based in traditional shinobi hierarchy. It was made of wanderers, exiles, orphans, and survivors, people who had once crossed paths with either Sasuke or Orochimaru, and had something left to protect. Karin, torn between her past and her grief. Suigetsu, who had once joked about killing Sasuke, but now could barely speak of him. Even Kabuto, twisted and lost in his own right, had a moment of clarity and offered a sliver of his accumulated knowledge before vanishing again. Their goal was not to kill Orochimaru. That would be too simple. Their goal was to reach the remnants of Sasuke that might still exist, buried deep in the corners of his consciousness. For Naruto believed, and perhaps only he truly believed, that not even Orochimaru could completely destroy the heart of someone who had carried so much love and pain. And so he searched, not just physically, but spiritually, through ancient seals, forbidden genjutsu, chakra synchronization techniques that bordered on myth. He looked for a door, a whisper, any sign, and one day it happened. Deep in the mountains, in a chamber guarded by constructs of bone and snake scale, Naruto found him. The vessel, Sasuke's body, sitting motionless on a throne of carved obsidian. Orochimaru's eyes greeted him with neither malice nor fear, only curiosity. The battle that followed was not like the others. It was quiet, a test of resolve, not power. Words spoken beneath the surface of chakra exchanges. Echoes of memories used like weapons. Naruto stood bloodied, but he did not yield. "I know you're still in there, Sasuke," he said, his voice hoarse. "I don't care how deep he buried you. I'll wait. I'll keep waiting." And something, just something, shimmered. Not a full crack, not a grand resurgence of the boy he once knew. But Orochimaru's smile faltered, just slightly. Enough. And then Naruto left, not because he couldn't win, but because he believed this was the win. The seed planted, the doubt introduced, the whisper rekindled. And Orochimaru, in his arrogance, let him go. Years passed. The world did not fall, but it no longer rose either. It stagnated. Orochimaru ruled from shadows, his influence in every major decision from the land of wind to the land of lightning. But he found himself haunted by echoes, memories he couldn't suppress. He would see flashes. Team 7 smiling on a bridge, a soft voice calling out, "Nissan," the sound of sandals running down a dusty road, chasing after a blonde idiot, shouting about ramen. He tried to erase them. He developed jutsu specifically designed to sever those remaining ties. But they kept returning. Sasuke, it turned out, had not been fully erased. And perhaps that was Orochimaru's greatest miscalculation. He had always thought of the human soul as a structure to be rewritten. But Sasuke was a contradiction made of fire and wind and sorrow. And no formula could undo that. The final chapter comes in a moment not of battle, but of stillness. Orochimaru, standing atop a tower beneath a moonlit sky, felt something stir. Not fear, not weakness, just warmth. uninvited. A single tear rolled down a cheek that hadn't wept in decades, and he heard it, so faint it could have been imagined. Thank you for protecting Naruto. Sasuke's voice. Not full, not present, but real, alive. And Orochimaru laughed. A bitter, tired laugh. For all his victories, for all his schemes, it turned out the one thing he couldn't conquer was the human heart. He had won, but it didn't feel like victory. And somewhere far away, Naruto opened his eyes from a dream he couldn't remember, and smiled. Because even in this darkest timeline, where the snake had consumed the hawk, the ember of friendship had not been fully extinguished. And sometimes that was enough to begin again. And so the world slept, its stories rewritten, its heroes scattered, but not gone, not truly. For in the hearts of those who still remembered the boy who once believed in change, a new tale was already beginning to stir.